It's not necessarily a stretch specific to foot drop, but it's more of a stretch that I really like to give people because they're not walking normally.
What would you call the last two stretches? So you said one of them is more of a yoga name. And again, it's the 1 minute.
Yeah.
Okay.
And again, too, if 1 minute is too long, I usually, if it's like, okay, like I cannot hold this for a minute, this is super uncomfortable, you can definitely adjust the times. It could be 10 rounds of 10 seconds. It could be 3 sets of 30 seconds, 2 sets of 30 seconds, a whole minute. Like just make sure that you're getting about a minute for each stretch.
Because even if you don't get the full minute, you can still get benefits because probably some people can't do that.
Exactly.
So that's our third and fourth stretch there. That was good.
Yeah.
Any other stretches that you can think of? I can think of at least something for the anterior tibialis.
So I do generally give people a stretch for the front. I really like the yoga pose, the child's pose. That's generally what I give people for this. So just making sure your feet are flat on the floor. And then what you're going to do is you're just going to sit your bottom back on your heels and just hold that position for about a minute.
Okay, so that's your big one for the front of the leg.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Another one that I like to do here. So again, when you have foot drop, it's not just your ankle that's going to be affected. Your toes are also going to be affected because you're not going to be walking normally. And so it's very, very important to keep your big toe mobile. And so another one that I like to do in this position is you kind of curl your toes under and then also sit back. And that's a really good one.
Really? Okay, so that stretches the big toe.
It stretches the big toe. It will also stretch out the bottom of your foot and kind of the medial arch. Because again, like your foot isn't working like it normally would. So normally you don't have to do this because your foot's already doing it while you're walking. But when you aren't walking normally, or let's say you're using your steppage gait or you're kind of hiking your leg around, like you're not landing on your foot normally, you're not pushing off your toes normally. Okay. And so this can kind of help maintain the mobility of the big toe, the medial arch, the bottom of the foot.
So what would you call the last two stretches? So you said one of them is more of a yoga name.
This is child's pose, but again, I'm not necessarily using it for the yoga purpose. I'm using it more for anterior leg stretch or a plantar flexion stretch. So I call it plantar flexion in child's pose. Okay. And then I call this great toe extension in child's pose.
Gotcha. Okay.
So again, just kind of modifying some yoga positions for my purposes.
I like these because people with foot drop and falling issues don't have to worry about falling in those positions because they're already in a safe position. So that's good.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. Especially now, the thing you do have to watch out for are the folks that these stretches are for, that they comfortable getting down and up off the floor.
Sure.
Which is another big issue for people who might have foot drop. They might not feel comfortable getting on the floor. So doing this on a bed would be an option.
Sure. Maybe first thing in the morning.
First thing in the morning or before they go to sleep.
Okay. Okay. Very interesting. I like all of that. So that was about 6 different stretches there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
For people with foot drop. You did mention other stretches up the leg now. Can we talk about some of that?
Sure. Also, the child's pose is actually a really good one for stretching the front of your thigh and your hips as well.
Gotcha.
It's all around like a really good position. And so now if I back up a little bit.
Yeah.
The purpose of this stretch now isn't for the front of my leg. It's now going to be for my thighs or my knees and my hips. Okay. And so what you also can do to make it more of a hip stretch is you can bring your knees apart.
Okay.
And then lean yourself forward. So you're working on sitting your booty back and bringing your face down to the floor.
So that starts to travel up from the knees up to the hips for the stretch.
Exactly. Exactly. So again, that's not necessarily a stretch specific to foot drop, but it's more of a stretch that I really like to give people because they're not walking normally and they might be compensating somewhere.
Right.
Like they're compensating somewhere.
So for someone who has a high steppage gait,
yes,
and maybe some tendonitis or something like that, this could help them. Okay, that's great.
The biggest thing too, if someone does have a steppage gait, they're really, really using the front of their hip to get their hip up. So what that kind of does is we're almost overusing this motion. And so I really like to get people out of this position.
Mm-hmm.
Also, if people feel like they're going to fall, they tend to kind of bring their feet apart and kind of lean themselves forward and kind of walk like this. Okay. So a lot of times getting out of that position and extending our hip back is going to be very, very helpful.
Okay.
Just from like a maintaining the hip range of motion perspective. So another one that I like to do, holding on to something.
Okay.
What this stretch is not, is it's not this. And it's not this. You're not actually moving. You're in your tall heel position. So that I call this a hip flexor stretch.
Okay.
So what you're going to do is you're just going to put your hands on your hips. And I tell people to tuck their tail feathers or like tuck your tail between your legs. And so you'll see when I do that, my hips kind of tuck under. It's very small, but you can kind of see that my hips are going under, tailbone's going under. My hip is being pushed forward. I am stretching now the very front of my hip a little bit down into my thigh, and I don't have to move anywhere. This is speed stretching.
So they're doing a slight posterior pelvic tilt.
Exactly. Right? Yeah. Okay. Yep.
Or tucking the tail feather. Okay.
Tucking the tailbone. Yep. Now, if you don't feel it in this position, then what you can do is you can maintain that posterior pelvic tilt and shift forward. But notice it's all of me shifting forward. I'm not arching my back and shoving my hip forward. I'm keeping that tilt and then going forward.
So you're able to do this because of the soft carpet there. I know some people are probably watching this thinking, my knee. Yes.
Yeah. And there are lots of other ways to skin the cat. So some people are able to tolerate this with a pillow underneath this leg. A lot of times they'll get like a piece of foam and put it under someone's leg.
Okay.
If someone is to the point where they don't feel comfortable getting down on the floor or they don't feel comfortable like putting a pillow under their knee because their knee is bothering them, a really good one too, and I don't necessarily have the means to show this one, but the one that I would typically do is I would have someone lie on the edge of their bed, providing it's tall enough, and they would angle themselves so just one leg would be hanging off the bed. And so you would be lying on your back with one leg on the bed, one leg off the bed, just kind of letting the one leg fall. And that would be getting you into a extended position. The purpose is not to arch your back to get that done. The purpose is more to keep that posterior pelvic tilt and then lift yourself off of the mat. So you're really focusing on the front of your hips and not just extending your back.
Gotcha.
So that would be kind of my focus there. And again, some people may not need some of these hip stretches, and that's okay. It's just for people who maybe are having a hard time with aches and pains elsewhere just because of compensations that they're having.
Gotcha. So that was good. That was about 6 or 7 stretches at least.
Mm-hmm.
That was great.